So Mamdani has won. And I'm going to talk about socialism as a person, and I'm going to talk about it from a layman's perspective because I think that's the only way to talk about it. So I'm going to talk about it from the eyes of my twin, and then I'll talk about it through the eyes of me living in Europe. Now, my twin was born in 1947, my beloved, and in 1947, the World War had just basically ended. He was a boomer. And there was what they call the Red Scare. Now, I might actually get shut down on this live, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Well, I'll spell out what's going to come through. Hopefully you guys can spell fast. But during the late 40s, early 50s, so by that time he's 10 years old, it's 1957, excuse me, don't ask me to come on. In 1957, he's having recurring nightmares that there was a nuclear, WAR, and that he was coming out of the trenches to save people. And he kept seeing himself as a 10-year-old boy leading adults out of the trenches. Now, many of you, neither was I wasn't born during that time, but I remember the stories, that there were people digging up their yards in the 1950s. They were what you call preppers of that time. And they had BOMB, boom booms, shelters in their backyard. I kid you not, underground. I kid you not, okay? Because it was the Red Scare. The Reds are coming. The Reds are coming. During that same time, so he's being raised around this environment of fear, that the enemy is the Russians, and so on and so forth. And during that time, because we need to talk about socialism, because I'm going to tell you the difference. And I'm going to explain to you why Americans are so fucking terrified and how they keep calling and pushing communism and mashing it up with socialism, which makes many of you who may believe this look actually ignorant. Okay? All right. Let me continue. So during that time, we've got the bomb shelters, we've got the Reds are coming, we've got the McCarthy era, we've got Hollywood being put under ice. It destroyed many, many, many fucking actors, directors, playwrights. If you've never studied this, if high school failed you by, skimming over it for 1 week, let me just say that you need to do your research and you need to just do some simple Googling and Wikipedia, and even go so far as to do at least one fucking documentary on what was happening with the McCarthy witch hunt that was going on during that time of anyone who was red, okay? The fear was palatable. This was a particular American problem. The Europeans were not having that scare. It was never mentioned in my family, neither in Switzerland, neither in France. Socialism was happening in Europe at the time, and I'll break down what that meant in a particular way through my lens. So this was happening. He was having these nightmares of the Reds were coming, and there would be a big boom boom, a nuclear level. And there was so from 1947, some of the boomers were born in 1945, 1939 in America, and they grew up afraid because their parents were afraid, and their parents were eating up this concept of the Iron Curtain being dangerous and so forth. And again, they were preppers of that era, and they were prepping for whatever could befall them. So there was a sense of doom, okay? And so he grows up with that. I'm in Europe. I'm born in the 1960s. And during that time, my mother was very sick. She had double pneumonia in Paris, France. And she was able to get the medical care that she would have never gotten in America, okay? And it saved her life. At the same breath, 2 or 3 years later, we were in London, and double pneumonia fell on her again. And again, she had a socialized system, meaning healthcare, free healthcare, which again, she was in the hospital for 2 weeks, saved her life. Now it's the 80s. I'm in a car accident. I break my nose very badly in this car accident that rolled. and I'm in Switzerland, and I walk into the hospital. I show them my ID. They do x-rays. They find out that I've broken a nose, and I walk out without a bill. Socialized system, socialized medicine, meaning medicine for everyone. Now, many people who are political students will break down socialism on a different rant. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about people who have been made to fear free medical health care and systems in place to help people who need a leg up, who need help. And an example of that would be not just free healthcare, meaning having a baby, but also having a government that will allow you to stay home through a full paycheck, okay? Or 70% of your paycheck. And when you have the baby, will actually pay you to stay home to bond with your baby. I was talking to a lactation expert about 2 months ago who said that she was heartbroken because these women, working class women, were going to go back to work 2 weeks after giving birth, and that the babies were not going to be able to continue being breastfed because they would dry out from stress, from the inability to lactate at work, having the privacy, the break time, and so forth, and all the bullshit. And just again, let me remind you that puppies are not allowed to leave their mothers, right? They're bitches, right? They're female dog mothers, right? At least 8 to 9 weeks. But we're asking women, human beings, to leave their babies after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. You're lucky if you get 6 weeks. Socialized systems will give people the right and the care of its government to take care of them when they are either having a nervous breakdown, or they've been in a very bad car accident, or they're dealing with a massive illness, and they are also helping someone in hospice care that they love die. And these socialized systems help and pay out to these people the ability to live with dignity. Okay? So what I find interesting, and whenever I used to speak to Americans, and I've been having this conversation since I was 21. Well, what about Canada? Well, Canada sucks with socialized systems and free healthcare, and people don't get this and don't get that. Let me remind you that Bernie Sanders was on bus trips to fucking Canada with busloads of Americans going to Canada. This would have been around the early 2000s to get insulin, to buy $1,000 worth of insulin that would last them for whether it was 6 months or the entire year. Okay? That's socialized systems. Now, I've been studying this for a while. I'm going to share with you what I spoke, because I have a friend who's looking to run for office, and he was talking about something as progressive as what Mamdani has been talking about, okay? Which is Americans having the dignity to be helped. This is something, it's not something we put down. It's not something that we berate. Poverty is not something we should shame, ever. And yet, we've allowed Dan Pena, for example, and if you don't know who Dan Pena is, you should look him up, because he teaches a top millionaire. By the way, it's a man's group, because I've never seen a woman in his retreats, where he teaches people, men, how to become, well, the pricks that they need to become billionaires, for the most part. Not all billionaires are assholes, but most of them are, let's be honest. So anyway, going back to socialized systems. One of the countries, the happiest country on the planet, is considered to be Finland, because they have a socialized system. Free healthcare, help, food is a human right, shelter is a human right, and it's handled. If a person can't handle it, if a person is too fragile to work, there are people that are mentally unable to do it. That's not laziness. Some people aren't wired. They're not good at this, where some of us want to work. In fact, some of you, if you were sitting on $100 million, would probably either start a business, run a business, or even work, because you love to be, your mind needs to be constantly in action. Okay, you'd be busy. You wouldn't be sitting there twirling, twiddling around doing nothing. But socialized systems, and I'll look down in a minute once I'm done, saved a woman. It was an American woman who was diagnosed with breast cancer. Now, I'm going to give you a contrast of the LA Times in 1996 doing a whole article on HMO. I'm going to tell you the story of two different women. So this woman, I read the article in around early 2000. I think it's like Y2K. We've just crossed into 2000, 2001. And this woman is struck by breast cancer, and she's in France. And she says she was shocked, because within the week, they had scheduled her mastectomy and radiation. I mean, she was set to go. I mean, and they were all fucking urgent. There was no bullshit. There was no, let's ask for permission. Let's get a committee. Let's get it approved. Let's look for the right fucking coding to get the billing. None of that was happening. She was in remission. Within 6 months, she was done, and she was in full remission. And she wrote in this blog, okay, we're talking about 2000, 2001, that had happened to her 5 years ago, and she never went back to the States. That taught her about what she had suffered under fucked up, faulty medical care. Now, here's the article in the LA Times. It would have been 1994, 1996, thereabouts, and the LA Times did a whole, like I said, article on HMO. There were a lot of doctors leaving California because of HMO, the system. They were being hamstrung. They were being paid $40 for something that should have been $120, whatever, right? So many of them were moving to Idaho, Kansas, you get the Wyoming, and to open their own practice away from the system. But in the article, they did a whole expose of a woman who was 34, the mother of two, and happily married. And she'd been diagnosed with breast cancer. And the fuckery of the doctor, her oncologist, first of all, the referral to the oncologist. Then there was the oncologist trying to get approval for the mastectomies, that because she was going to get a double. And then there was that, and it went on for fucking months. It went on and on and on. The approval, the denials, the bullshit. And finally, she fucking died. She left a husband she loved and two young children under 12. I'll never forget this story. She had dark hair. She was beautiful. She was a beautiful young woman. And she died because of the bullshit of the capitalist medical system. Okay? Had she been in France, Switzerland, London, anywhere else, her life would have been saved. Now, let me talk to you about today. In London, this is recent, a Japanese woman, young, I think she was like in London to study somewhere. She was a student. And she was diagnosed with leukemia. Her life was saved. She got all the care. There was no questions. Are you here? Are you here legally? You have a student visa. It was done. And people will say to me, well, that's why they're having problems. And I would say, a human life saved is never a problem. Now, in 1984, my father and my mother lived in San Francisco. He had a heart attack. My father, being an old-timer, was the kind of man who kept about, I'm not kidding, $10,000 in his briefcase. They're old-timers, born in 1923 during the fucking Depression in New Jersey, okay? So being a successful businessman, he kept cash. That's how they roll. And my mom, as he was having a heart attack, followed the ambulance with the briefcase, IDs, this, whatever they would need, right? They refused him I'm not joking when I say he's having a heart attack, and they were refusing to admit him because he did not have insurance. I don't want you to tell me, oh, but that's against the law. 1984, San Francisco, he was refused. Until she opened the briefcase and threw down an envelope with 10 grand. They gave her a receipt and he was admitted which saved his life. Had he been in Switzerland, France, Italy, Spain, Portugal, London, England, Scotland, Ireland, there would have never been a conversation about money or insurance. The racist levels that I'm hearing people make comments about Sharia law and shit of that, I'm just going to jump right into this. Look at how she's dressed. It's on their wedding day. He's Muslim. They're on the metro. They just got married. Does she look like an oppressed woman? And I had to explain to my friend, a masculine who's running for office, I had to explain to him, there are fascist religions in Christianity, in Muslim factions, in Jewish factions. The three Abrahamic religions, yes, now you get me, have fascist wings and progressive wings. We have in Christianity wonderful pastors, wonderful people who embrace gay people, same-sex marriage, and I could go on and on. Similarly, all three religions have those progressive ideas of human rights, because I'm going to use Yeshua as a template, okay, for now, because Yeshua is a template. And if you've ever really sat and listened to Muslims who are progressive, who are loving, who are charitable, who have honor, integrity, who actually are the reason why we actually know about Plato, Socrates, I should throw that in, because a lot of people are ignorant. They are the ones who kept our fucking European culture together. While the Catholic Church was burning fucking shit down, it was the Arabs, the Muslims, who scribed, who wrote down Socrates, Plato, Herodotus, Sappho through Cicero, and I could go on and on. Okay? And the other 30% or 25% of what was kept from the fucking insanity of the witch burning of knowledge from the ancient world, from the antiquities, were the Byzantine Empire. Okay? So some of the mathematics, some of the astronomy, some of the things that the Egyptians had passed down to the Greeks. Herodotus writes about his, travels to Egypt. If you look at Greek mythology and ancient Egyptian mythology, you can see the morphing of the Greek gods from the Egyptian gods. I mean, you got to be an idiot not to see it. That then trickled into the Roman gods, from Greek to Latin, Bacchus to Dionysus, and so on. You start realizing that the racism of the divide and conquer has been an agenda that's been extremely successful. But people are like throwing out comments like Sharia law, like they know fucking Sharia law, like they're experts. And I would ask you to ask the following, which is what I did. Tell me 3 to 5 things that are fantastic about Sharia law for women. And it's spat out within, I don't know, less than 7 seconds. If you really want to know, the knowledge is within seconds of your knowledge. So when racist people make racist comments, I have to ask, with the knowledge at your fingertips, do you really want to not know, or are you just here to just spread hate? Because clearly, these are progressive young people. And frankly, as a boomer, I'm going to say this. I think we should have an age limit on politicians. My son said, do you think it should be 69? I go, no, it should be 65. And I'm in that age range, by the way, and I'm saying it. I'm fucking saying it. Because I know how the brain stops. I know what happens as you get older. I know. And there are some people, and I told him, there are some people that are incredibly wise, incredible people, and we should keep them as advisors. Okay? But I really think that it's time for us to have young people. The last great president we had was JFK, and they were young. I forgot his age, but I think he was like 42 or 43. I remember. And Jackie Kennedy was a young woman. I am sick to death of seeing old, decrepit fucks like Cuomo, who can't keep his, you know what, Willie Nelson in his pants, to be pushed down our throats as the only hope. When you study socialism through the lens of a human being, not through a scholarly book, but it's actually working system, right? Meaning, people who have lived in Europe, who now compare. My son has a friend who broke her arm, okay, right here in America. I think it was 2 years ago. Went to ER. There was no orthopedic surgeon. They could not put her arm in a cast. Do you understand? So she flew back to Sweden to get medical care. Do you get that? And it was free. Maybe a copay of $30 or $50 at most. But if she couldn't pay that, she would have never been, and her arm was put into a cast. Did you know that in ERs right now, from California to New York, there are no orthopedic surgeons? You have to go to someone, and you can't go to anyone unless you have health insurance. Okay? So the cutting of Medi-Cal and Medicare and Medici and Medidat is massively concerning to people who could break their leg and be fucked for life. Because you see, they don't have the money nor the passport to go to a foreign country to get care. Socialized medicine has not destroyed countries. Capitalism has. And when Mamdani says we should not have billionaires, is he wrong? Tell me, is he wrong? Because when I talked about the Red Scare, and I'm going to go back to McCarthy, towards the end of McCarthy's rule of terror, because he used to say they're the Reds, I mean, he would just fucking go off. If you go look at his old videos on him, he's fucking losing his mind. And he was a nutter, okay? But towards the end, he says, it's the Eluma. And that's what he would say. And when he said that, my beloved said they had him in a funny farm. And somehow he fell out of a fucking high-story building. Somehow fell. And because suddenly he had changed from red to that word, connected to light, connected to something else that's not allowed on the internet. If you've noticed, you don't hear that word anymore, but it's connected to something else. So I first saw Islamophobia, just so you know, during the hostage takeover. I was about 13 years old when Jimmy Carter was in office, and Khomeini, and I'm ashamed to say this, Khomeini had been allowed to be exiled in Paris. That piece of shit was allowed to be exiled in Paris. And the Shah of Iran had been overthrown, as you know, and Khomeini was allowed into that land. And the atrocities, I won't even go into it. I won't even fucking step into that shit. Because it's the beginnings of me realizing the brutality. But the Red Scare, which I grew up hearing about later on as I came to this country, was interesting because, again, my father had served in World War II as a GI, American soldier. He was a tank commander. And he'd been in the European stage, as they put it, with Patton's Third Army. And he loved Patton. Patton was an incredible thinker, and he could see 10 steps ahead. In fact, there's a famous story where I think he was in Italy or somewhere. I forgot what it was, but I remember that he felt like he was the reincarnation of Caesar. So he believed in reincarnation. But the Red Scare was such a big fear for the American consciousness that when Vietnam happened, now bear in mind, Vietnam was first handled by the colonialist French, who had been there for centuries, 150, 200 years, if I'm correct, for rubber plantations, for the rubber, right? And other things, obviously. But then when the Red Scare came in and the French got their asses kicked, the arrogance of the Americans decided to come in and do better. And you saw what happened. They got their asses kicked too. They had to stop. That's how scary the concept of the Red Scare was. And to be honest, I find it weird that, think about it. The Atlantic Ocean separates this continent from Russia. And Russia is connected to the Europe. In other words, the European continent is closer, right, connected to the Russian landmass. And you would think they'd freak out, but they never did. I never grew up with people freaking out over this shit. Maybe it's because they'd gone, like my generation of family members had gone through 2 wars, occupied twice, right? And yet, that wasn't what they feared. And when these wars ended and the rebuilding happened, the concept of offering human beings basic rights of dignity to be fed, to be clothed, to be sheltered, was never a debate. It was just what you did. And I think Roosevelt understood that with his New Deal when he realized that there was no way to get the Americans out of the shit show called the Depression. And so in a way, that was a socialized system. Do you understand? In other words, the government stepped in to help the people because it could not do it without it. See, that's the purpose of government. It's not to oppress, bully, scare, beat, rip people apart. It's supposed to protect. Think of a government as a great auntie or a great uncle that adores you and only wants the best for you, basically. And to do otherwise is toxic, narcissistic, and sadistic. But going back to what happened with the hostages that were, I think, under hostages, I think it was 130 days. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'll read your comments in a minute. It was scary. I remember as a little girl, I was worried about those people. I had a big heart, and I would watch the news with my family, and we were bated breath, hoping that they would be released. Bated breath. And thank God they were. But at that point, now I lived in California, Islamophobia became insane. I remember watching, I live in Beverly, I didn't live in Beverly Hills. We lived in Pacific Palisades. But Beverly Hills was next door. And how people were attacking people who looked a certain look. Persian, Arabic. And that's when I first saw that kind of racial hate. Attacking innocent people, wonderful people that had come to this country because of the regimes that were so dangerous they had to escape. One of my friends, I'd gone to I'd gone to boarding school in Switzerland with girls from Tehran. Beautiful, fabulous, highly educated girls. And I often wonder how many of them survived these regime shifts. But one particular woman who I met, she was very young. She'd gone through an arranged marriage, and the collapse was happening, right? The Shah was being removed, blah, blah, blah. And shit was getting really crazy. And this is I'll never forget, I met her in 1983. And so she escaped in the 1970s by horseback. She had cut her hair very short to look like a boy. She had the face of a Nefertiti. Swear to God, absolutely gorgeous woman. And she had cut her hair very, very short to look like a boy. I kid you not. And they had to cross deserts on horseback. Sounds like a movie, right? Well, it's fucking real life. Movies come from real life. and they had escaped by the skin of their teeth to Germany. She had sewn some gold in the seams, as they had done in World War II and World War I, by the way. It was sewing your jewelry. That's what the Russian, I could tell you a story about a Russian countess my mother knew, who had escaped Russian during the Russian Revolution with her chauffeur, I kid you not. But anyway, the story goes that my friend had sewn all of her jewelry at the hem of her coat. So it to hide it. And in those days, you could get away with shit like that. Today, try that today. Good luck. It's not going to work with, security and this and that. But in those days, it did. And they went to Germany. And then from Germany, they came to America, the land of the free and the brave. And she had to deal with the racism, Islamophobia. And so don't forget, okay, when you look at religion, that each branches of the Abrahamic religion has fascist, misogynistic branches, but it also has benign, loving, and fair branches. Not every Christian is alike. Not every Muslim is alike. Not every Jewish person practicing Jew is alike. Some are good and some are assholes. It's really that simple. I feel like I'm talking to, I don't mean to talk to you like you're 12, but I feel like some people need to hear this. It's really important to me. When Muhammad Ali, who was a family friend, believe it or not, became Muslim, there was a reason that he rejected the Christian, Baptist type of teachings, churches, and he turned to Islam. Well, first of all, let me remind you that many African slaves, and this is not talked about enough in my opinion, many African slaves also were Muslim, practicing Muslim. They spoke Arabic, they read Arabic, they wrote in Arabic, they spoke to a God being Allah, which is Arabic for God. And they were brought here in chains. Some of them were scholars of the Islam faith, or they were scholars and scientists and mathematicians and philosophers, and somehow got caught up in the machine of slavery. So when somebody like Cassius Clay became a Muhammad Ali, or Malcolm X, okay, went to Mecca, and I'll never forget, watch the movie with Denzel Washington, but he says, and again, I'm not sure if it's in the movie, I know my mom had met Malcolm X in this soul food restaurant in Paris at the time called, what was it called, Haley's, or... It was a soul food restaurant originally established by a former football player, Black American football player who had moved to Paris and opened this soul food restaurant in the 1960s. But anyway, he, meaning Malcolm X, went to Mecca and said, I didn't realize that my brothers were also blonde hair, blue-eyed. And that's when he came back a changed man. He no longer saw all people based on their skin color as enemies. He realized it's like he went through a massive fucking shift. Again, people change. People transform. And sometimes overnight. And that's why traveling is so important, I think. That's why living in various countries, and I don't mean going there for 2 weeks. That's not living. Living means 2-3 months in a country, a year in a country, being hurt in a country, having the flu in a country, ending up in the hospital in a country, and realizing, and then comparing what you've experienced here as opposed to there, and you go, holy fuck. What the hell stories did I believe in? So when somebody like Mamdani says, I am a socialist Democrat or a democratic socialist, And then he explains to you what he's saying, right? What is that? Well, he's saying, I want you to not have to fucking spill blood to pay your heating bill. I don't want you to have to second guess whether or not you can eat or pay the rent. I don't want you to look through change in your couch because you're paycheck to paycheck and you're trying to figure out if you have enough coins to take the bus to work. I know people who would sometimes have to call in sick because they didn't have the gas money or didn't have the bus fare or metro fare to go to work, so they would call in sick until their check was deposited to start the cycle all over again. When my aunt gave birth to her daughter, she received early 1991, 1990, thereabouts. She was receiving at the time $600 a month for the first 3 years of her child. And she got free daycare. And she continued her studies to get her PhD. She was a single mother living in Paris. That's socialized systems. Are you okay now? Have you gone to Paris? Do you have to wear little hats? Are you forced to goose step? Are you okay now? That's what socialized systems look like. They don't oppress. There's still free speech. There's multiple newspapers that have different ideology, from communistic newspapers to socialist newspapers to Democratic, Republican, and so forth. Newspapers. It's considered free speech. You don't have to be afraid. No one is going to fucking knock on your door at midnight. And so Mamdani is young, fresh, idealistic, excited, energetic. He's not exhausted. He's not taking a little red pill to I'm just saying, he's not taking any pills to keep it going. He loves New York City. And in watching him being interviewed about his favorite restaurants and him being shamed for eating with his hands, the irony of ironies is that eating with your hands, once you've cleaned your hands, right? Once you eat with your hands, the flavor of the food is purer. This is known all over the world. To the point where the French, if you want to have a really good meal, it should actually be with either sterling silver or sterling silver plated utensils and certain types of porcelains that maintain the integrity of the food. And this is known, including what vessels you drink your wine and the shape and how that shape and the kind of glass, I could go on, retains the integrity of the flavor of the wines. For example, and eating with your hands is the quickest way to keep the integrity of your food rather than with a plastic fork, a plastic plate, or some kind of stainless steel whatever that can have a tinny taste that clashes with the integrity of the food. No one's going to argue that point with me because they can't. I've worked in culinary. So with that said, I think, when you look at this wonderful, beautiful young couple that are so in love and so progressive. She's an artist. I don't know if you've studied her at all, but she's a visual artist. And she is a progressive human rights artist. If you look at her line drawings and what she's created, she's very much about human rights. I remember living in Hong Kong, because I'm going to give you a different point of view, because not everyone who's rich and has privilege is an asshole. I'm a good example of that. When I had money, my parents were they had money, okay? And I lived in Hong Kong, and I lived in the presidential suite. I'm not bragging, I'm just telling you. I'm about 13 and a half years old in Hong Kong. It's the 1970s. And I saw the people living in little boats right in Kowloon Bay. And I remember seeing a woman with no legs with her daughter begging for alms. The contrast between the wealth of the butlers and the valets and the Peninsula Hotel with the Rolls Royces and the boys opening the doors for you with glove and the gold, when you walked into the tea room and the gold everywhere. And I mean gold on the walls, like, actual gold leaf. This is like the 70s. And the contrast of the abject poverty of people was very much like a conscious shift like Buddha had when he was Siddhartha, the prince. Meaning, you have all this money and you go, wait, hang on, why are these people suffering? Emperor Nero didn't think like that, doesn't think like that. We have an Emperor Nero right now. He doesn't think like that. You would have thought he would have grown up and thought like that, being, a multimillionaire or millionaire, like walking around New York City and watching poverty, in contrast with the private jets and the helicopters and the cars. I did. This man, Zoran, has also, obviously. If you looked up his father's books that his father has written, they're all about the exploration of social ineptness, failures, and best practice and worst practice. His father is apparently a human rights scholar, but he's written over 12 to 13 books from what I scrolled on Amazon.com. Not everyone that was born in privilege is an asshole, though a lot of people born in privilege are. And it's shocking. You would think that, people would go, what can I do to make the world better? Jimmy Carter is a good example. Jimmy Carter was working on Habitat for Humanity. And he was lambasted for what happened with the hostages. And he was lambasted for having lust in his mind. I kid you not. I saw it happen. They were saying, oh my God, the president's got lust in his mind. What a freak. He loved his wife, Rosalind, or Roseanne, whatever her name was. Sweet lady, right? But why am I saying all this? Because we have really done a number in looking up at the wrong people for the wrong reasons. And I'm tired. I'm tired of looking at old men, old men that should know better, old men that have actually walked off private jets and have seen abject poverty. They've seen diseased children. They've seen starvation, and they don't give one fuck. I'm tired of old men. I think we need, and I'm saying that as a boomer, as an elder to you, that we need young people like this to now to co-create the kind of planet that is kind, loving, that creates abundance for all, because we know that poverty is by design. It is not something that happens suddenly out of the blue. It's by design. It is a fucking matrix. It is a template. And it does not need to continue. When Tony Robbins said he had made himself a billionaire and announced it to one of my clients who is also quite well-to-do, not there, but quite well-to-do, I realized that even in that sector, the goal for most of these people is to be billionaires, not to figure out what is my responsibility. I've been given this ability to talk and to rally people, and this. Where can I build community? Where can I make sure people have housing? How can I assist so that people aren't fucking broke? There's a pizzeria that in New York that said, show me your SNAP card and we will give you 2 pizzas and a soda from the fountain. No questions asked. Heretic Cafe in Portland, Oregon has done the same thing, raising $200,000 of people like you and me, donating $1, 90 cents, whatever, rounding it off to the nearest number, right? $200,000 to give people, what they're calling SNAP breakfast. Meanwhile, Grocery stores that wanted to be patriotic and American were offering people with SNAP cards the ability to get their groceries for 50% off, and that was struck down by Emperor Nero. That's shocking to me. And everyone is pointing fingers. The reason why Mamdani won, one of the many reasons, besides really actually answering the questions of people's concerns, groceries, rent, and so forth, was that he realized that this fight to win was going to be gloves fucking off. And the reason why the Democrats have been losing and failing us again and again is because they have been playing tiddlywinks when they had all kinds of information to pull out of their back pocket and literally slaughter the opposition through debate. Through the kind of debate that gives you levels of mic drop moments, like what happened to Como with the 13 women and the allegations. So they're going to be throwing all kinds of bullshit. I just saw someone do a video on the, the Statue of Liberty in a full black hijab. I kid you not. A full, covered over. Let's put it that way. The level of meanness, mean and stupid combinations is rampant. And it's making people who should be actually educated. I mean, I'm expecting, when you're a billionaire, I'm expecting you at least fuck college, but you've at least read books, you've lived in various countries, and you should know better. But the Islamophobic sentiment that is erupting out of people who sound ignorant. I mean, I'm talking about to levels that blows my mind. I'm like, dude, you gotta, do you even know how to read? Do you know anything about Arabic history? Do you know anything about how the Western world owes a debt to the Arabs for everything we take for granted as classic European antiquities? It's shocking. The average Muslim knows 3 languages, if not 7. I'm jealous. And I don't like using that word. Jealous, because they know that's the average. 3, if not 7 or more. We should aspire to be more like that. To be able to quote poetry. Rumi. Who do you think fucking Rumi was? I'm like Omar Khayyam. Who was Omar Khayyam? The Rubaiyat. There are also people who are Arabic who are Christian. I don't know why I have to say that, but I guess I should. Jews and Arabs, Muslims and Christians have lived together in peace for hundreds of years. Hundreds of years. When the Crusaders came back to Europe, they taught the rest of Europe to bathe. And there were public bathhouses like they had in ancient Rome, where noble women and men bathed in the nude like they do in Japan, by the way. And of course, here comes the Catholic Church with their bullshit, right? And after, I think it was 50 years or 100 years of public bathing, and I'm talking about beautiful bathing with oils coming out of that part of the world, the Silk Road, right? They shut down all the bathhouses, and soon enough the plague came upon the land. The continent of Europe was struck by the plague. Similarly to the Catholic Church killing all cats. And so now and it was like a domino effect. No cats, you've got rats, you've got pestilence, the Black Plague. The Arabs knew that. In ancient Persian temples, castles, palaces, they would have Persian cats, the kind of cats you see on the James Bond movies from Sean Connery and Terrence Young. Those movies from the 60s. Yeah, those Persian cats, yeah, they would walk freely in the palaces, Persian palaces. The guards were spectacular, but he also understood the benefits of cats, kind of like the Egyptians. Cats, less rats. Less rats in the coffers of their wheat, keeping their wheat in their jars and their olive oil in their jars. They were natural guardians to keep everyone from disease. I think we need to really use ChatGPT for more than, especially in the spiritual community. Like, don't use ChatGPT to ask it if you are of royal lineage and all that shit, because it'll kiss your ass if you're not careful, and then you'll be an idiot. You'll be an asshole. Why don't you ask ChatGPT, if that's what you're using, or Claude, or Grok, or whoever the hell you're using, about socialism, the way the Europeans have used it. Let's look at best practices. And Canada is not a good example. I'm sorry. It never was. And I would have debates with my friends. And it didn't matter if I was in LA, San Francisco. It didn't matter where I lived. It was always Canada as the example of failure, when all of you should have known that the health insurance industry was a for-profit, not a non-profit. And hence, they would propagandize all of that to make you afraid, just like they made you afraid of the red, fear with McCarthy, just like they made you afraid of Muslims. It's by design. And misogynistic systems do exist in the Christian system, doesn't it? Are you going to argue that point with me? Because you can't. You know it's there. In Judaism, it's there. In Islam, it's there. And then we have progressive. I'm repeating myself because I have to. We have to use the template of Yeshua, who never discriminated against anyone. No one was discriminated against, ever. That's why you have this t-shirt. Oh my God, that's not what I said. Famous t-shirt, right? Famous meme, whatever. Meme. He would have never gone against two men loving each other, because in the ancient world, and he would have known that, because that man traveled, my friend. He traveled. He didn't just stay in Palestine. At the time, it was called Palestine. He would and did travel. He had too much knowledge, too much wisdom to get it from a little fucking village, okay? And he would have heard about the great gay warriors who were revered for their courage. Gay. Okay? I wrote a poem that I eventually will read, and I'll have to put it up on YouTube, hopefully, but it's called In the Arms of Victorious, about what the Romans used to do, which was they would adopt, because they couldn't marry, right? So they would adopt the man they loved as their son. And when they died, that son, quote unquote, his lover, his man, could inherit property, title, and so forth. That's how they went around it in the ancient world. In the Greek world, it was considered absolutely ridiculous to actually want to have sex with a woman. That was crazy. But there was a time, it lasted about 100 years, where that became okay. Do you understand what I'm saying here? Why am I saying all this shit? I'm going all over the place in different tracks, because fucking read. Fucking read, know history. There's a reason why they say those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it. There you go. That's why they say that. And if you're too lazy to fucking read whole books, and I completely understand, I'm actually not putting you down on that at all, you, whoever you are, but fuck, watch documentaries, watch movies that show you actual pieces of history. Like, my favorite movie on the Muslim story of the Crusade is Kingdom of Heaven. My favorite talk about the Knights, the Knights Templars, it's Freddie Silva. And I read here and there sparingly. I'll read from this book and I'll read from that book. It's like I'm snacking on knowledge. That's how I read. I snack. I'll do a chapter here on that book. Like right now I'm reading stuff on Yeshua. And I'm reading 3 different books on the subject on Yeshua, kid you not. And then I watch other shit on that's completely unrelated to him. That's how my mind works, because unfortunately, it's you could call it ADHD, Gemini energy, whatever. But ultimately, okay, do they look like what you're afraid, what you've been told? Look at what she's wearing. Does she look like she's an oppressed woman and you're gonna, oh my God, we're gonna be oppressed? It's gonna be. Do you see her? What is she wearing? There's actually one where she's wearing a black bra. It's actually how I used to dress when I was her age. I'd have a black bra and a see-through top. That's how I used to wear. And it was elegant because it would be a certain style. I used to dress like her. Her style is very Caroline Bessette Kennedy, John John's wife. They were elegant. They were all of that. And they were young. And it was exciting. It's beautiful to see a young couple that's fucking whip smart and elegant, who give a fuck about human beings. It's actually exciting. So don't fall under this fear of Islamophobia. Now, are there people who are of a particular religion that are fascist? Yes. So know how to discern the difference. There are people, and you know that, throughout this country and other countries, where you should be able to tell the difference between progressive and fascist, misogynistic. You should know the difference. The word Christian doesn't contain integrity. It should, but it doesn't. And you should know that. There are some Christians that are the most beautiful people you'll ever meet on the planet. Just like I've met some of the most beautiful Muslim people who are the most beautiful people I've ever met. Just like I've met some Jewish people that were absolutely loving and fair. And right now we have Jewish people right now who are devout Jewish people, devout to their religion, who are fighting like fuck for the rights of Palestinians to live equally on land that they lived on for thousands and thousands of years. It's not a debate. I'm not going to go. Religion is a religion. I can be Buddhist and I can be from Norway. Just like I can be Muslim and I can be from Norway with blonde hair and blue eyes. Just like I can be Jewish and I can be from China. I can convert. Religion is not a race. It just isn't. That's why you've got Muslim people in Norway who look like Vikings. That's not a conversation. That's a fact. One of the great movies I ever saw, which is kind of campy. It's like a fucking, if you're into that shit, which I am, honestly. I have a girl's love for movies, but I also have a palette, the palette of a guy for movies. So one of the guy movies I love is called The 13th Warrior. The 13th Warrior with Antonio Banderas. Great fucking movie. About a Persian, actually. You'll love it. It's funny as fuck and kind of wild. But it's called The 13th Warrior. And Antonio Banderas is one of the lead. He plays a Persian who ends up somehow, Omar Sharif is in that movie as well, and somehow gets involved with fucking these unhinged Vikings. They're unhinged. It's hysterical. It's hysterical. He's riding in the movie, they're all, riding horses like Percherons and Clydesdales, that kind of breed of these heavy cold-blooded, what they call cold-blood horses that are massive. They're like 17, 18, 20 hands, right? And then he rides a fucking Arabian mare or stallion, and it's about 14 hands is the average of an Arabian horse. And they tease him saying, "Oh, you're riding your dog," because they're like, what the fuck? And it's an incredible movie because you see him learning their language. He learns their language. And again, it's called The 13th Warrior. I highly recommend that movie. I highly recommend Kingdom of Heaven, where, again, you see how we Europeans, and I'm going to say we Europeans, integrated ourselves with Middle Eastern and Eastern culture and dress and food and so forth. And it's beautiful. And I don't know when it began, really, honestly, because we've always had racism. Always. During the Abrahamic religion, I'll say it that way. But there was a time when we did not have these weird ideas that were so limiting and so vile that it would harm even ourselves. Racism is painful to even a racist. Even a racist suffers the poison that he or she drinks that is called racism. It isn't a one-way street. It's a boomerang. That's the irony of being a racist. It harms you as well. You might not know it, but it's like a drip, drip of water. And eventually it erodes everything worthy of you. And you lose things energetically because you're a match to petty evil. And when you're a match to petty evil, you will lose a lot of things and not realize that that's called karma. And that's why it harms you. I love these pictures. When he first came out to run, and they were getting married, or this is their wedding day, and they're running around having a great time. And the way I forgot to finish my sentence. I know that I'm just aware of it now. Is the way he talks about all the restaurants he loves, and he can name every borough, every block, every restaurant. What ferry to take, what to do, how to do it, what free things are available. This young man loves New York and knows it like the back of his hand. He has not been ensconced in limousines and helicopters above the city. He's been in the city. It's obvious. Because he knows that place like the back of his hand. And I'm going to tell you something. He's made me fall in love with New York City all over again by just listening to him. It's like a tourist pitch. Like he's pitching some of the best hot spots. And it's made me want to actually go to New York City and explore all over again. When I was a kid and I lived in New York City, I went to high school there. And one of the things me and my girlfriends would do is literally go to like 6 different joints, all cheesecakes, and all we would do is order a slice of cheesecake and share. And look for the best fucking slice of cheesecake in New York City. Another thing we do is go for pizza pies and look for the best fucking pizza slice. And we'd run around until 3 o'clock in the morning doing that shit. That was in the 70s, late 70s. And I had such memory of New York and the Peking Duck and in Chinatown and just the hot dog stands and Central Park. And some of the danger, to be honest. I mean, New York was not for the faint of heart. New York could be tough. New York was tough. And quite often I would take walks from 90th and 3rd down to Park Avenue. I kid you not, in cowboy boots and at 10:30 at night. I'd get home by midnight. And my parents let me, which shocks the fuck out of me because it was not safe. But I did it. And for the first time in decades, Mamdani made me fall in love with New York City. When he won, I think it was off Franklin Street, but it would have been all over New York. And from what I'm hearing all over the world, people were fucking screaming in joy. The last time I ever saw something exciting and mind-blowing in New York City, and I'm going to say exciting because even though it was very sad, is when John Lennon was shot. At the time I lived on the east side and I was taking a bus to the west side. And I went by, it was like 6:30 in the morning, driving by the Dakota apartments. And people had already gathered around the Dakota apartments with flowers. And the way New York mourned John Lennon's loss, the loss of John Lennon. And Central Park had a memorial, I'll never forget, where they asked the city of New York to stay silent in respect to him for 10 minutes. Many of you remember that, 1980. And when Central Park stopped, you know, all the people that had gathered in Central Park, the city stopped. The city was silent for 10 minutes. I kid you not. And it was raining. And then suddenly the clouds parted, as is known for New York, and there was the sun, and a rainbow appeared. And this is a fact. This is what happened. New York was silent for 10 minutes and bent a knee to John Lennon's memory. So the excitement of him winning and the awe I felt in the joy and the cries of triumph from the guy who's the busboy, from the guy who's the head chef of a restaurant, like Anthony Bourdain. I love Anthony Bourdain. I miss him. We all miss him. But he was able to capture New York's energy in his very beautiful book, Kitchen Confidential, where I almost peed my pants reading the first chapter, laughing fucking hard. I mean, I was laughing my ass off. You should read it. But he had massive respect for the immigrants in his kitchen. Immigrants from Haiti, immigrants from South America, Puerto Rico. These men who worked their asses off in his kitchens and who made him shine. The very things that made, you know, New York special. And the fact that when you look at Ellis Island and you look at the history of people who ran away from subjugation and starvation, the Irish, the massive movement of Irish into New York and into Boston, because they were being starved, you know. Thanks, Queen Victoria, for your incredible patronage of the Irish, but that's another show. And the many others that fled, like my great-grandfather was German Jewish from, you know, Germany, escaping, and bought himself a farm in New Jersey, where he ended up meeting my great-grandmother. So we seem to have forgotten where we come from and why we came here. And what makes us different was, religion. That's right. Language, religion, the melting pot. Remember that? The melting pot? People were proud to speak American, and yet they still were able to worship God, the one God, you know, for God. When you read Jesus in Aramaic, did you know that Allah is the God in Aramaic? I found out that truth this year. How dumb am I? Why aren't we told shit like that? Why aren't these supposed pastors and preachers and evangelists don't teach us that? To unify us. How people worship is their fucking business. As long as you don't touch the kids, that's my motto. Don't fuck with the kids, don't touch the kids, we're good to go. I don't care if you want to wear a tutu at 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't give a fuck. Just don't touch the kids, we're good to go. So we have this fresh, young, powerful, bright young man who can think on his feet. You ask him a question, and if he hesitates, he's thinking of the right answer, or he actually fucking slams with the answer. The way he's been interviewed before, as he was running, where some of these reporters were trying to catch him on I got ya, were ridiculous, and he always came out shining like a rose. He came out constantly winning. And he did what most Democrats have failed to do, is none of them, I'm sorry, I think some of them are too old. And I'm saying that, and I'm sorry. Maybe they're too old. Because I know that your generation of millennials and Gen Xers are irreverent. And that's what we need right now. We need massive irreverence, power, vision, urgency, and absolutely no patience for bullshit. And I'm saying that. And that makes me sad. It makes me sad that I have a generation, my son keeps telling me, and I'm in shock. I come from a generation of motherfuckers who are multimillionaires, who are wealthy, who are billionaires, who will not give their wealth to their children. It looks like you boomers, have all decided to have children to shit on them and to not let them inherit your wealth because you're a piece of shit. Unless my son was harming animals or children, and I think you know what I mean, right? I would never not give him everything I got. Because when you're a parent, you give them everything. And apparently, this young man here, married to this beautiful young woman, were given wonderful opportunities and privileges, which they use very wisely in seeing the contrast of poverty and despair, which many of these boomer generational wealthy fucks have never deigned to do. Dan Pena, you look it up, P-E-N-A, Dan, look up Dan Pena under the Christmas tree. This was during COVID, I believe. And he's under a Christmas tree. The Christmas tree must be 20 foot high. There must be 100 to 200 presents under the tree. And he said, "You poor fucks. That's what Christmas looks like. You poor fucks." That's what he said. How many times do we have to do a Christmas Carol version? How many times do we have to do Oliver Twist? And if you don't know these books, you should. You should know the movies at the very minimum, if not the books. But how many times are we going to have billionaires and millionaires, multimillionaires, shame people for being the poor, hard-working class? And how many times are we going to let middle class sink further and further down the ladder? Shaming people for taking SNAP is evil. Telling people that they're not allowed to have a good meal under SNAP. I remember when SNAP literally would not let you have a warm meal. I know because I have friends who have SNAP. I've had to have SNAP. Long time ago. And I'm happy I could. But there was a moment where you were not allowed to have a warm... Can you imagine being homeless and you can't have a warm turkey dinner with mashed potatoes and gravy because I guess they want you to just have whatever? How are you supposed to have a warm meal? A warm bowl of soup? So for a while, and I'm not sure if that's still true, you could not get a warm... Anything that was warm, you were not allowed. That means you couldn't get an omelet. You couldn't get French toast. You couldn't get anything warm. Not a fucking cup of coffee or hot chocolate to warm your hands. That's evil. Just like the benches that are made so that you can't lay down, that's evil. Shit like that is evil. There's a thing I posted of, it's supposed to be Jesus on a bench sleeping, swear to God, for you Christians, right? And you can look at it under my repost. You'll find it. And it was outside a church. It's a bench, and it's called Jesus on a bench. And he's laying down sleeping. Within 20 minutes, someone called the cops, complaining that there was a homeless person sleeping on the bench. I'm not kidding. We better do better as a people, because that's absurd. That's absurd. I'm going to tell you, and I'll leave you with this story, because this is what I remember that I love about Paris. I was 10 years old. It's New Year's Eve. And my aunt has taken me under one of the famous bridges of Paris. People are wearing tuxedos. Women are wearing ball gowns and diamonds. I kid you not. And they're bums. They're homeless people, what they call bums. In France, they call it clochards. And these homeless people are milling around, and they're popping open Moet Chandon champagne in real glasses, real plates, real sterling silver. I mean, not sterling, real utensils. And they have on either side of under that bridge food, foie gras, caviar, prawns, lobsters, meats, roasted meats, salads, desserts. The tables are groaning with food, and you can smell the smell of champagne that's been spilt, and people are getting drunk, and they're dancing, and there's music, and there's laughter, and no one is telling the homeless people to get the fuck out. That's what I saw at 10. And I was part of the crowd being pushed around by jovial laughter and joy. Watch the movie Henry and June to give you an idea of how people partied in the 1920s and early 30s, right before the war. It's about Anais Nin and her love affair with Henry Miller. Uma Thurman's in it. Henry and June. And that joie de vivre. This non-judgmental, oh my God, yeah, homeless, okay, clochard, yeah, would you like a glass of champagne? What is your name? Oh, my name is John. Not looking down at the person and telling them to get the fuck out. Included in the party of the mighty ones, the rich ones, clearly. And that struck me. I think that memory, I've never forgotten that memory. And it's one of my best memories of Paris, to be honest. Because I saw a balance. And I saw an innate, not questioned generosity. No one was shamed. I don't think you could see that even in Paris today. I doubt Paris is the same. So we as a people around the world, we've changed, and not for the good. We have more knowledge, and yet we're more judgmental. We judge. We shame. And we exclude. But I think that we're going to start changing back to our truest self. Discussing New York history, share your memory. Well, I'll tell you a story. Well, I'll tell you many. New York City, when I was a kid in the 70s, I used to go to Canal Street, and they had some of the best, I'm sure that's still true, but they had some of the best vintage clothing. I remember I lived, we lived over, we had a three apartment. It was called Lincoln Center. It was next to the Lincoln Center on 63rd and West End. And my high school was McBurney. And I could actually hear the bell ring, sort of God. So I would wait till the last minute to get to school. I was always fucking late, though I lived right across the street. And they were building this apartment. And so my dad was able to get literally an apartment where it was 3 apartments in one. So in one side, you could see the Central Park. We had an incredible panoramic view of the Central Park. So the apartment was so set up. It was 3 apartments in one. And it was, you could see the sunrise and the sunset. I kid you not. And so then my father had something happen. And we lost everything overnight. Boom, overnight. And before I knew, we were on 90th and 3rd. And those experiences were fantastic, in my opinion. I don't remember. It brought our family really close. And I remember, but when I did live on 63rd West End, I would go to Lincoln Center all the time and hang out there. And there was a place called Amy's. And it was a chain. And they sold falafel sandwiches. It was famous. It sold soft yogurt, you know what I mean? What is it called? Frozen yogurt type of thing. And they would put dried fruits and sunflower seeds and that kind of thing. And all of us in my school, we go right to Amy's, and we would have a falafel sandwich damn near three times a week. A falafel is Middle Eastern food. You know that, right? Anyway, so the hummus, the tabbouleh, all of that, we grew up with this, we were just hanging out. And what I loved about living in New York is that all my friends, we were all like 16, 17, thereabouts in that age range. And we would go and have cappuccinos. This is in the late 70s, 79. We're having cappuccinos and we're talking about art and photography and novels and acting and politics and human rights and things of that nature. And so the kids there were massively progressive as compared to the kids in Pacific Palisades in California, in Southern California. There, I would say to you, I had absolutely no friends because there was nothing. They had nothing to talk about except getting high and getting fucked. Whereas in New York, it was a whole different, there was a sense of culture, intelligence, curiosity, and there was a bond with this school. It was a very small school. I think it had 75 girls and the rest were boys, so a total of 250 students. Ted Koppel had gone to that school. It was very elite. Henry Winkler was once a boys' school and then became co-ed later on. And I was walking in as one of the first, I think in the last 10 years, co-ed students. And but Central Park you could actually sit under a tree in Central Park and not see a human being for 15 minutes, which was extraordinary. I'm not sure if that's still possible now, but it was then. And when I would take my walks late at night, which I'm still in shock. My parents let me do it because it was dangerous to do that. But I would start my walk at around between 9:30 and 10, and I would be on a 2-hour walk. And a couple times I got chased by men. And thank God I was on the track team. And so I could outrun them and dodge them and step into bodegas or magazine stores or whatever and kind of wait, and I'd see them running by, not realizing I'd step back in a store or whatever. And I would still go and take my long walks in spite of those situations, which I think back on it, I'm like, how the fuck did I survive myself? That's a dumbass thing to do, but I did. And I'll tell you a story that was really cool. I used to love to go to, I'm trying to remember believe it or not, I forgot the name of the hotel. What was it called? It was right off Fifth Avenue. I'm trying to remember the name and I can't right now, but they had Tucher chocolate, which was being shipped out from Zurich every week. But I remember we went to the tea room, high tea. And it's a very prestigious hotel. I can't believe I forgot the name, but it's right off Fifth Avenue. It's very prestigious. Anyway, so my father decided to book us a high tea. So we were there. And as I sat there, they're bringing the card, blah, blah, blah. But he says, do you see that woman over there? I'm like, what woman? The woman, the plain Jane, the one that looks like Mary Poppins. I went, okay, yeah. And I see this woman sitting there. She's alone. And sure enough, she's wearing a navy blue suit, skirt suit type of thing. Very chiseled features, good-looking woman, barely any makeup. And she's sitting there. And he says, watch her. She's a call girl. I went, what? I'm like, you have to remember, at this point, I'm 16, 17, maybe 16 and a half. And my mother's sitting there too. And my brother, and he's telling us, watch, she's a call girl. And we see a man who was having lunch in a neighboring table with his wife. And apparently in a neighboring table with his wife. And apparently, so I'm not sure what happened. That was weird. But anyway, so there's this call girl, and the husband kisses the wife. And then I see that he's standing there and he walks by the call girl's table and leaves a room key, and just keeps on walking. She finishes her tea. She finishes everything. Somehow the bill is paid, and she walks right out with the keys. So it was interesting because this experience showed me a different type of world. A world where there were shadows and there were various ways that women, in particular women that you would have never thought in a million years, earned their living, and how corrupt some of these men were. I mean, right in front of his wife, basically, which I thought was wild. Anyway, I'm going to let you go, and I apologize for suddenly dropping the live. That was wild. And I'll talk to you soon. Namaste, be well.